Hi, my name is DAGMAR WUJASTYK. I'm principal investigator in a research project called Entangled Histories of Yoga, Ayurveda, and Alchemy in South Asia, or Ayur-Yog for short. The project is currently taking place at the University of Vienna and at Inform in the UK, and it's funded by the European Research Council. We're a team of three. At Vienna University, there's myself, and I'm trained as a classical Indologist, so in the study of Indian history, literature, culture, and languages, and especially Sanskrit. And my research focus has long been on the history of Indian medical literature and alchemical literature, and now for the project also on yoga literature. Also at Vienna is my colleague Christelle Barrois. She's also trained as an Indologist, as a Sanskritist. Her focus has been on Puranic literature and yoga in the Puranas. The third team member is Suzanne Newcomb, and she's based in the UK at Inform. She's a social historian and has worked on the history of yoga in the UK. And I think she's also part of this conference, so you may have heard of her already. Together in the Ayur-Yog project, we're looking at the historic connections between the three disciplines of yoga, Ayurveda, and alchemy. How did they intersect over time? What do their literatures and what we know of the disciplines from other sources tell us about how they engaged with each other? We are specifically focusing on how the different disciplines approach the topics of health and healing, querying whether this is a theme that connects them with each other or perhaps puts them in opposition. Right now, we're exploring the topic of vitalization, longevity, and juvenescence practices, the so-called Rasayana or Kaya Kalpa practices, as a shared theme. Our sources are the Sanskrit literatures of Ayurveda, alchemy, and yoga for the pre-modern period, and actually also for the modern period, because Ayurvedic writing, at least, and also alchemical writing in Sanskrit, goes up to and includes the 20th century. For the modern period, we're looking at government reports, popular publications, and we also have done interviews with modern practitioners. Before I get into the Rasayana and Kaya Kalpa practices, which will be the focus of my talk, I'd like to talk a little bit about what inspired Ayur-Yog research and how this relates to the topic of the conference, Yoga Reconsidered. So let me focus on yoga for a start. Today, many of us, and with this I mean both practitioners of yoga and the general public, associate the practice of yoga with health and well-being. The many different schools of yoga have, of course, different emphases. These do not always include health-related aspects, and health may therefore not be a primary focus or aim for yoga practitioners, or for all yoga practitioners, but it's certainly a feature that is present in most representations of yoga. There's a large literature on the genre of yoga for health. You can Google yoga for health and get up many hits. So there's many websites on the subject, wide offerings of yoga classes that focus on the preservation or improvement of health. The range of health topics is very broad. So there's very general health claims, things like yoga is good for you. Yoga can lead to better relaxation. It can counter stress. It can increase well-being, give you a better range of movement, make you more fit. There's also more specific health claims in which yoga is described as addressing medical conditions, from back pain, yoga for sciatica, to cancer or mental health issues, drug addiction, just to give some examples. It seems that most conditions can somehow be addressed through yoga, at least to some extent. So you name the conditions, somebody will have claimed that their yoga practice can address it. Health-related claims are most typically related to specific postures or sequences of postures, but also to breathing and meditation exercises. Perhaps the most famous representation among these are found in BKS Iyengar's iconic Light on Hatha Yoga, which lists some of the health benefits of postures, of asanas, and of breathing exercises, so of pranayama. And I'd like to show you, in case you're not familiar with that literature, I'm going to try and share my screen and show you what I mean. So this is BKS Iyengar's The Illustrated Light on Yoga. This is a bit newer than his original Light on Yoga. It's a kind of DIY do yoga at home book, and it describes the different postures and breathing exercises and also explains what their effects are. And I wanted to show you how the effects are described. So let's go to one of the postures. Actually, I think I want to go to the one below that. So here we have Veerabhadra Asana, and he describes what happens in this posture. And then, oh, sorry, I think I should go up a little bit. And then he describes the effects. So in this case, he says, this asana relieves stiffness in the legs and hip muscles and makes the hip joints and spine elastic. While the head is resting on the knees, the abdominal organs are contracted and toned. The wrists move freely and any stiffness there disappears. The posture also corrects round and drooping shoulders, and so on. So, I mean, what one can see from this description, which is fairly typical for all the descriptions of asanas, is that there is reference to muscles and also to abdominal organs. So this idea of contracting and toning abdominal organs is something that is perhaps not based on a very scientific understanding of anatomy, but perhaps we can just understand it as a layman's idea of the biomedical functioning of the body. And just to note, this sort of focus on muscles is something that we don't actually find in the pre-modern text, but that really makes sense for modern yoga practitioners, I think, together with the idea of fitness. So if we then go to an example of an explanation for pranayama, we have the description of ujjayi. The practice of ujjayi here is the technique. And then further below, and marked it somewhat clumsily in yellow by me, the effects. So this type of pranayama aerates the lungs, removes phlegm, gives endurance, soothes the nerves, and tones the entire system. Ujjayi without kumbhaka, done in a reclining position, is ideal for persons suffering from high blood pressure or coronary troubles. So again, we have a sort of lay person, so somebody who hasn't studied medicine, idea of the body, of anatomy, and it's a modern understanding. The reference to high blood pressure, for example, means that we're presupposing a blood circulation, for example, and this is an image of the body that was not there in the time Hatha Yoga was first developed. The idea of yoga as universally beneficial to health has been challenged in recent years. A number of people have pointed to issues like injury through yoga and problems arising through abuses in teacher-student relationships that negatively impact both physical and mental health in yoga practitioners. The received wisdom of the benefits of yoga are rightly being reviewed, and I think this has led to some important changes in the ways people approach practice, and especially the teaching of yoga. Nevertheless, I think we can safely state that health and healing have an established place in globalized forms of yoga. In India, yoga has long been part of national healthcare, and in this context, it is considered an indigenous form of health practice. The Ministry of AYUSH, which is sort of the Ministry for Health for indigenous medical systems in India, supports education and research in yoga and has established first steps in the regulation of practice with a voluntary certification scheme through the Quality Council of India. So just to give you an idea of what this looks like, sort of the official kind of yoga in India, let's have a look at the Ministry of AYUSH's website. So I'm going to attempt to share the screen again. Okay, share screen, and now let's go to the Ministry of AYUSH. There we are. So here you have it, the Ministry of Ayurveda, Yoga and Naturopathy, Unani, Siddha and Homeopathy. So AYUSH is an acronym for that. And if we go to, I'll go down actually on the screen, we can read about the systems. And there you have them. They're listed here: Ayurveda, Yoga, Naturopathy, Unani, Siddha, Homeopathy, and Sowa Rigpa, or Tibetan medicine. And you can see yoga is part of this list. The ministry was actually formerly a department of the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, and only became a ministry in its own right in 2014 as part of the government's efforts to specially promote indigenous knowledge in this field. I think they're particularly interested in promoting yoga and Ayurveda. Earlier, the department was called the Indian Systems of Medicine and Homeopathy, and yoga was there as one of the Indian systems of medicine. And it used to be formally coupled with naturopathy in the scheme of indigenous medical systems, so it would always be yoga and naturopathy. And if you think about the acronym of Ayush, you know, there's no N there. That's because yoga and naturopathy is sort of counted as one word, as it were. So this goes back to the early period of independence, when the new government of India was setting up its healthcare provision for the peoples of the new nation of India. And quite a bit later, in the 1970s, the government also established a Central Council for Research for Yoga and Naturopathy. So if you want to know more about the connection between yoga and naturopathy, you know, have a look at the work by Joseph Alter, Yoga in Modern India, is the book I think that's the most relevant. And the integration of yoga into national healthcare is also a subject that Suzanne Newcomb has been working on. She's been looking at government reports on medicine in India, both pre and post-independence, to see when yoga entered the official medical establishment. She published an article, The Revival of Yoga in Contemporary India, in the online Oxford Research Encyclopedia, and this article contains a section on yoga as science and public health. But if we look at this list of the Ayush website about the systems, Ayurveda, yoga, naturopathy, what is hidden on this list is Indian alchemy or Rasa Shastra, so Indian alchemy and yatra chemistry, chemical medicine. It is there, however, it's just subsumed by Ayurveda. So it's here. Metallic and mineral medicines and the methods of their production, which were originally developed in alchemical milieus, now are part of Ayurveda. So there's departments of Rasa Shastra in universities, sort of parts of the Ayurveda departments or Ayurveda universities. And training in the methods of production is part of the Ayurvedic curriculum. The subject Ayurveda also hides yoga in a sense. So there's modules on yoga as part of the Ayurvedic curriculum. So if you want a degree in Ayurveda, which is a fairly involved degree of 5 years of study at least, you will have some modules on yoga, though it's a very minor part of the studies. So let me show you about that. The curricula for Ayurveda are not found on the Ayush website. They're found on the Central Council of Indian Medicine's website, which is here, ccimindia.org. And if you click on Indian medicine, you will find Ayurveda. And there you can see the syllabus and curriculum. You can click that, and then you can click here for the various syllabi for the different degrees that you can get as part of the study. So I'll just click on further on. So I've opened in another page, I've opened the syllabus, and just to show you, so actually now I can't find it, of course, as a typical. Well, what I wanted to show you is that the curriculum does have, there it is, okay, so Svastavrita and yoga is part of the Ayurvedic curriculum. And if you look a bit more closely of where is yoga actually, then it's really here just under number 10, the concept of Ashtanga yoga and its relation to health, concept of moksha. So you have a small bit of yoga as part of the Ayurvedic curriculum. The official curriculum for yoga is, I would say, probably a bit less well established. It's rather newer than the one for Ayurveda. And it's found on the Quality Council of India's website. So the yoga certification is done through the Quality Council of India, and this is their website. So you can see here there's a syllabus, and you can have the syllabus for instructor or for teacher. And if you click the one for teacher, you get the following curriculum, which has a few Ayurvedic elements, but actually also only very little. It's basically under yogic diet. And then you find that under yogic diet, a yoga teacher should be familiar with an Ayurvedic approach to diet and nutrition and the ethical and spiritual reasons for a sattvic vegetarian diet. So sattvic and probably in the Ayurvedic sense here. So to recap, the health-related aspects of yoga practice have been promoted in India and globally since about the middle of the 20th century, a little bit earlier, actually. But in the earlier textual record on yoga, like the very early textual record on yoga, the attainment of yoga, of the state of yoga, was understood as a soteriological undertaking, and its auxiliary practices were directed at the attainment of spiritual aims, not health, really. And I suppose they were also directed at attaining special powers. So to return to the Ayurveda project, this to me spurned the question, when did yoga become medicine or a practice associated with health and well-being? So we saw from the example of Iyengar's book that nowadays health-related aspects of yoga are usually expressed in a biomedical idiom, in layman's terms, sometimes with a more scientific underpinning. But if health was a concern to yogis in the past, their ideas on anatomy, physiology, and medicine would have been very different to how we think of these things today. So this is why Ayurveda is exploring whether or how medical claims within yoga traditions, so in the textual record, how these are connected to the dominant Indian medical traditions of the past. Can ideas about healing and well-being arising in historic yogic traditions, yoga traditions, be linked to the scholarly medical tradition of Ayurveda or to the heterodox medicine of Rasa Shastra, so Indian alchemy and iatrochemistry? Or were there other sources? How do these traditions compare with each other in their medical goals, concepts, and practices?